Drafted 15th overall in the 1987 NHL Draft, Nordiques/Avalanche legend Joe Sakic would become a part of a young core that would soon be set to dominate the late 1990s. Sakic was one of the most productive forwards in the game, and one of the most electric players once he entered the NHL, as Joe would finish with 62 points in 70 games before completely breaking out the following season, scoring 102 points, never looking back. But most should have known what to expect from Joe, as he displayed such dominance all throughout his junior career. Sakic's shot was deadly, and most goaltenders feared his wicked wrister. He was known for his goal-scoring prowess, which was shown once Joe reached the NHL, as he sits 14th all-time in goals in NHL history. But the reason why I wanted to mention Joe's junior career is because his younger brother, Brian Sakic, also dominated in junior hockey. I'm sure most of you have never heard of Brian, and that's understandable, as unlike his older brother, Brian would never play in an NHL game despite being drafted by the Capitals in 1990. But during his junior career, Brian was just as good, if not slightly better, than Joe was. And there's a reason as to why. In his last 3 seasons in the WHL with the Tri-City Americans, Brian would tally a total of 429 points in 199 games. When comparing his numbers to his older brother, he blows him out of the water, as Joe only had 293. But it's important to know, however, that Brian's massive offensive outburst took place when he was considered an overager, and his only other 100-point season would be during his second season in juniors. This is an NHL video, however, not a juniors one. When you compare Joe's NHL numbers to Brian's, Joe has a 1,641-point lead. Many question why Brian never played a single game in the NHL, as he showed promise. He looked like a great playmaker who could generate chances. Brian even thought so as well, as he was once quoted stating that Joe was faster and a better scorer than he was, but that he might be a better overall playmaker. Perhaps we'll never truly know what Brian Sakic could have been, but his older brother Joe was a force for years at the NHL level, and it's safe to say that Joe was clearly the better Sakic. This is a continuation of a series where we look back on some NHL stars of the past or present and compare them to their relatives. Also keep in mind that before we go any further, we've previously already talked about Pavel and Valery Bure, as well as Brent Gretzky and his no-name brother Wayne. Who? So with all that out of the way, there's another force from the 1990s that we need to look back on.
Moved off the boards by Ninema. Big hit by Lindros, knocked down Konstantinov. Konstantinov without a stick, he fell down. He's on woozy street.
Eric Lindros was one of the most hyped up prospects to ever enter the NHL, being called the next one due to his dominating, intimidating play, as Eric's big frame combined with his scoring abilities made scouts from all over fall in love with the Oshawa General. Lindros is iconic in more ways than one, as he's known for being one of the best power forwards in NHL history, as well for his controversial beginnings. We've talked about this a lot before, so we'll keep it simple. Basically, Lindros refused to play for the team that drafted him. Ironically, that team was the Quebec Nordiques, and he stated that he would hold out until a trade was made to send him elsewhere. Well, he would get shipped off alright, being a part of one of the most impactful trades in NHL history, becoming a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. While in Philly, he alongside of his line mates Leclerc and Renberg would form one of the deadliest lines in hockey, the Legion of Doom. A line that not only destroyed teams physically, but on the score sheet as well. Not only did Eric produce, but he laid a pounding on the opposition and was almost always throwing the body. His physical play allowed him to create separation as well as generate more scoring chances. But as well as that style worked for Eric, it came at a price, something both he and his younger brother Brett would learn all throughout their NHL careers. Brett Lindros may have not been a first overall pick, but he too played a very similar style to his older brother. Both Eric and Brett were bigger in size, and Brett too also took advantage of it. However, Brett Lindros would only play a total of 56 NHL games, and it wasn't because he was a bad player. In fact, despite his low totals, he looked extremely noticeable almost every time he was on the ice. But he failed due to injuries. When playing a physical game, you're bound to face the dangerous consequences, which both Lindros brothers did. Brett would suffer a series of concussions that would eventually force him to retire just 2 years after being drafted. He would be diagnosed with post-concussion syndrome, something Eric would develop further down the line, as hits from both Darius Kasparaitis and the infamous Scott Stevens would cause Lindros to slowly fall off. But while at the top of his game and healthy, Eric Lindros was one of the most physically dominant power forwards in the entire league, making him the better Lindros. Now, it's time to transition a bit, as the two legends we just talked about were significantly better than their brothers, but heading into this next part of the video, we'll be taking a look at two sibling duos who both dominated the NHL. And while we're on the topic of power forwards, what better player to talk about than Phil Esposito? Phil was one of my personal favorites to look back on, as he was an absolute beast. When he was on the puck, he was pretty much unmovable, and despite not being the fastest skater, he was the powerful one. His hockey sense was also outstanding, as he was always able to position himself in front of the net and had a handful of shots in his arsenal that he would utilize to his advantage. Phil was a goal scorer with a good shot, and Bruins fans took notice, often displaying bumper stickers that read "Jesus saves, Esposito scores on the rebound." Not only was his net front presence valuable, but he could score from any angle, setting an NHL record for the most goals in a single season, scoring 76 goals during the 70-71 season, a record that would stand until the arrival of Wayne Gretzky. Esposito would score a whopping 717 goals throughout his NHL career and will be named one of the top 100 players in NHL history. And so would his younger brother Tony, who, unlike Phil, never scored at all, as the man they called Tony O was the backbone of the Blackhawks in net. Tony Esposito was often credited as being one of the pioneers of the butterfly style, and it was extremely effective for him. He was extremely athletic and had outstanding movements in net. Tony's breakout would occur when he was selected by the Blackhawks during the intra-league draft, and once arriving onto the scene as a rookie, he took the league by storm, recording a .217 goals against average and 15 shutouts to not only take home the Calder Trophy, but the Vezina Trophy as well. What makes this even more impressive is that back then, the winner of the Vezina Trophy would be the goaltender with the fewest goals allowed in the regular season. After that monster rookie season, Tony O continued to dominate, becoming a bit of an Iron Man at that, as he would play at least 63 games for 8 consecutive seasons, once replacing longtime Blackhawk Glenn Hall. Although never playing a single game together, both the Esposito brothers were phenomenal players who both would enter the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's hard to truly say who was the better player, as both brothers played different positions, so it's most likely better if I let you all decide instead. Sadly, Tony Esposito recently passed away, so let's give a few moments of silence to remember his greatness. May he forever rest in peace. Next, let's talk about a pair of brothers who did get to play with one another. Those brothers being Henry and Maurice the Rocket Richard. Now, if you don't know who the Rocket was, then personally, you're missing out, as he was truly one of the first faces of the NHL, as both he and Gordie Howe would dominate the 40s and 50s. Maurice had a knack for finding the back of the net, and he was one of the first to ever reach the 50-goal plateau. Despite only doing it once, however, he would be awarded the iconic Rocket Richard Trophy, given out to the player who scored the most goals during the regular season, aka Alex Ovechkin and a few in between. But the main reason he was called the Rocket was because of his tremendous speed, strength, and determination. His powerful strides mixed with his elite hockey IQ made Maurice a dangerous player whenever he was on the ice. But I want to shift the attention to his younger brother Henry, as the Pocket Rocket may have actually been a tad bit better than his older brother. Let me explain. I personally feel that Henry Richard is an extremely underrated player, as despite holding the record for the most individual Stanley Cup wins ever at 11, he did a lot more than just win Stanley Cups. Maurice was the goal scorer, while Henry was the playmaker, oftentimes leading the league in assists. Henry proved he had elite playmaking abilities. Both the Richard brothers had the luxury of playing alongside of one another as well, playing 5 years together from 1955 to 1960. Henry actually beat out Maurice in point totals, finishing his career with 80 more points than the Rocket, 1,046 to be exact. And Coach Blake was even once quoted stating that playing with Henry forced Maurice to become a better player, which eventually helped prolong his career. The main differences between the siblings can be seen simply by watching them both. Maurice was a stronger, more physical player, while Henry was the faster brother who preferred tactical playmaking to generate chances. Both Richards would impact the NHL in more ways than one, making them the most legendary sibling duo in NHL history, having the Sedin twins B. Let's shift our attention away from duos and over to trios, as these last pair of siblings all had the luxury of playing with one another. Peter Stastny and his brothers Anton and Marion are the most iconic trio in NHL history, whose impact helped turn the Quebec Nordiques into contenders on a yearly basis. All three Stastny brothers had to defect over from Czechoslovakia, but once arriving to the NHL, they proved the dangerous journey was well worth it. First, let's start with the best brother of the bunch in Peter Stastny, as he would absolutely dominate the 1980s. Only one other person would put up more points than Peter did during the decade, that being Wayne Gretzky. So you know Peter had to have been good, and he was more than that, as he would set rookie records in his first year in Quebec, producing 70 assists and 109 points, taking home the Calder Trophy. And once Marion arrived a year later, Peter and his brothers formed one of the most unstoppable lines in NHL history. Peter was the superstar, and clearly the best of the bunch, producing 6 consecutive 100-plus point seasons. But Anton Stastny deserves his credit as well, as Anton was mainly the one setting up and creating most of Peter's scoring chances. Whenever Peter scored, Anton had the assist, as he would produce an 85-point rookie season, consistently being a 60 to 70 point producer, mainly racking up 30 to 40 helpers a season. His best performance was in 1983, where he would tally career highs in assists and points, racking up a 92-point campaign with 60 assists on the side. Then there was Marion, who unfortunately had the worst luck of the three brothers. Not only did Marion have the lowest point totals of the trio, but he would also have the least games played, due to a series of injuries that prevented Marion from taking his play to the next level. Regardless, he still managed to produce an 89-point and 79-point campaign within his first 2 years of being in the league. It's always fun looking back on and comparing NHL legends of the past, but when taking a look at sibling duos, it shows just how different they really are from one another. But they're legends for a reason, and they showed it not just through their actions, but also through their words. TonyEsposito, who we talked about earlier, was never afraid to speak his mind, but when he did, he inspired millions watching at home with just a few words of his own.
Well, I'll tell you, we love, every one of us guys, 35 guys that came out and played for Team Canada, we did it because we love our country, and not for any other reason, no other reason. They can throw the money for the pension fund out the window, they can throw anything they want out the window. We came because we love Canada. And even though we play in the United States and we earn money in the United States, Canada is still our home, and that's the only reason we come. And I don't think it's fair that we should be booed.